quite a show. A lot of news, a big Supreme Court decision that people have been waiting for quite some time, the Hobby Lobby decision. And of course, this is a test of boundaries. Where does Obama's imperial dictates, where do they begin? Where do the Congress's dictates begin? And where do religious freedoms end? Well, in this particular case, we had a narrow Supreme Court decision, 5-4, that ruled in favor of closely held corporations being able to have religious freedom, not to have those mandates mandated on them. Well, what about the rest of us? What about the rest of us who are being forced to buy policies that in many cases are far more than we need? For example, young men being forced to get maternity policies when they're single, that type of thing. Of course, this is a bill that was written by the insurance companies for the insurance companies' profits. It's been changed at will by Obama, and they tried to destroy this company, levying $1.3 million a day fines on them. I mean, that's even more than Hillary Clinton makes in a speech. You know, that's about 5 times what she makes in a speech. So that's a lot of money because she makes a lot of money with her speeches. But don't think that religious freedom is breaking out all over the place, because we've got the military banning Bibles while they're forcing soldiers in Bahrain to adhere to Ramadan rules. Also on the news, we've got calls in Congress for refugee status for Central American kids. And this is not just Obama and Democrats calling for this. This is people like John McCain, because this is an opportunity for them to exercise control. Understand that they're using children to take down the border, just like they use children to take down your individual rights to keep and bear arms, just like they use children for everything that they want to do. And of course, they create a crisis, but they say it's not a crisis, it's an opportunity. Pelosi was at the border this last Saturday in Texas. She was giving a speech. She said that the border breach is an opportunity to serve God's children. Well, then why all the animosity if they're God's children? And of course they are. Why is there all this animosity towards people who don't want to kill them through abortion? Do you see the inherent conflictions there? And of course, we've got a story up on InfoWars right now. FU. Left-wingers want to burn down Hobby Lobby after a SCOTUS win. Certainly, they don't see children as a gift from God created in his image, deserving of respect and dignity. Well, where is Nancy Pelosi when children are being fondled by the TSA in airports? What about their respect and dignity? Well, that's a different case, isn't it? Because that's against American citizens. That's not against illegal aliens. And then we have not only Pelosi seeing this as an opportunity, we also have a new House Majority Leader, the guy who replaced Eric Cantor. He's talking about the border security. He says, let's get the border secure, then we can legalize everybody. Okay, that's an opportunity to him. He said, he calls it an opportunity. He says we have an opportunity to negotiate for the legalization of illegal immigrants. See, the problem with all this is, of course, they are deserving of respect, just as Americans should be deserving of respect. But Pelosi made an interesting comment when she said, I would just love to bring all of them home with me. Well, why doesn't she? Well, because there's practical limitations of how many she can care for. There are practical limitations as to how many children I can take care of, how many children I can adopt, how many children you can adopt. And of course, the government enforces those regulations if we start to go through adoption. We're not allowed to bring in 100 kids into our homes. We don't have homes large enough. We don't have incomes large enough for that. And we can't, as a society, bring in all of the children from Central and South America.
Celebrate the spirit of freedom and liberty upon which our nation was founded at InfoWarsShop.com. Molon Lave is ancient Greek for come and take it. This popular design combines both classic Greek Spartan imagery with modern M16 assault rifles. Now available in women's tees and proudly made in the USA. Celebrate the spirit of 1776 with the George Washington brass belt buckle or this incredibly sharp-looking 1776 hat. Badass. And be sure to check out the new arrivals at InfoWars Life, where you can prepare your body to perform at peak levels with Survival Shield Nascent Iodine, Super Male Vitality, and Fluoride Shield. And wake up, America. Immune Support Blend is the healthy choice for the gourmet coffee lover. So get incredibly high-quality, freedom-based products and help fund the revolution at InfoWarsShop.com.
The institution that was created in the aftermath of 9/11, Homeland Security, is what is pushing the police state, the security state, the surveillance state within our borders, the harassment, the violation of our freedom and dignity while they stand down at the border. Same group at both the border and internally. This is all Homeland Security. Homeland Security is in charge of the borders as well as these agents that are harassing us. Very important report to see, and of course there's a report up on Infowars.com. This should end the TSA, the hypocrisy of what's happening at the borders versus what they're doing at airports, bus stations, train stations, and on roadblocks. Now, we had a major Supreme Court decision come out today that people have been waiting for quite some time, and that is whether or not a couple of closely held businesses who have religious objections to the Obamacare mandates, whether or not they should be allowed to exercise those exemptions on religious conscience. And they tried to fine them $1.3 million per day. That was the Obama administration's response to that. While Obama carves out exceptions at will to his friends, delays things, cancels things, rewrites Obamacare at will, they were going to try to shut down Hobby Lobby with $1.3 million per day fines. Now, of course, it's Hobby Lobby and another small business. Well, Hobby Lobby is not a small business, but it's closely held. It's a family business. It's not a publicly held corporation. It's a corporation just in the sense of its tax effects, essentially a small, closely held corporation. And a small Mennonite-owned cabinet maker called Conestoga Wood Specialties took this to the Supreme Court. You know, if we would all fight for our rights like these people did, we could stand these people down. I mean, they were either going to, they put everything on the line, just like the Founding Fathers. They said they pledged their lives or honor their fortunes on establishing their rights. And I really admire them for taking this fight all the way to the Supreme Court, not caving in. If they'd lost, they would have lost their businesses, of course. Now, it's interesting, I think, to look at the response, the reaction to the Supreme Court decision from people like Justice Ginsburg, and also to look at what people are saying on Twitter, the hate, the profanity that's going on with Twitter, people calling for Hobby Lobby to be burned down. We have that article up at Infowars.com. But let's look at what the Supreme Court Justices Kagan and Ginsburg have said. Now, Kagan says, Congress has made a judgment and Congress is given a statutory entitlement. Okay, so just obey it. And then Ginsburg says, this is a decision of startling breadth. Corporations could opt out of any law that is incompatible with their sincerely held religious beliefs. What is it about the Constitution that they don't get? When the Constitution says that when it comes to free speech and the free exercise of religion, it's not just about privately holding your beliefs in the closet. It's about exercising and acting on those beliefs freely. And what is it about the fact that the First Amendment says Congress shall make no law? If Congress makes a law abridging free speech, abridging your religious convictions, your exercise of your religious convictions, that law should be ignored by juries, by Supreme Courts, by everyone. It should be challenged. She goes on to say, Congress enacted the Religious Freedom Restoration Act to serve a far less radical purpose, and mindful of the havoc the court's judgment can introduce, I dissent. Yeah, you see, you don't come up with a Freedom of Restoration Act which guts the First Amendment. See, it's not restoring anything. It's infringing on our rights when they do something like that. The First Amendment is supposed to be radical. The Second Amendment is supposed to be radical. The Fourth, the Fifth, the Sixth, they're all supposed to be radical. It's a radical idea that we have rights that we possess as human beings that the government can't take away. And those were put there specifically to protect individual rights. That's a radical idea. and we're not going to see it chipped away, infringed little by little. Now, what's it really going to mean? Well, Independent Women's Forum had some interesting observations about this. They pointed out that roughly 85% of group plans right now include contraceptive coverage, and that was the case before the mandate. So they're not going to go away for most people. They also said 99% of sexually active women in the U.S. have used contraception, so it's not going to go away either. You've got 85% of the plans that had it before the mandate, and if somebody thinks that that's an important benefit that they want, they can choose to work for those 85% of the companies. And then they also point out that there's a fallacy to the argument that if something is not mandatory, it will cease to exist. I remember when I grew up that we had these sayings, right? You don't hear them too much anymore. You're going to make a federal case out of that? There ought to be a law. We also had another saying that was, it's a free country, isn't it? Well, you know, we've been saying that there ought to be a law for everything, and we've been making a federal case out of everything for so long that I don't hear anybody saying it's a free country anymore. We inherently know that it's not a free country, and that's the reason why, because we've let them gut our individual rights, and we need to stop that. Now, just in case you think that religious freedom is breaking out all over, there's an article here from the Gateway Pundit. Military bans Bibles but forces soldiers to adhere to Ramadan rules, and that's in Bahrain. And this is a memo that was put out by Stars and Stripes. They said, U.S. personnel accustomed to drinking their coffee on the drive to work will have to put that habit on hold for about a month. It's one of the few lifestyle changes that Americans will have to make during the holy month of Ramadan. Meanwhile, the U.S. Air Force kicked Christian Gideon volunteers off of the base in March who were handing out free Bibles. We've got news on the immigration front. We see that there are calls now in Congress to give refugee status for Central American kids. Two problems with this. Number one, they define children as anyone up to 31 years of age. That's what Obama did when he announced his amnesty. That's what's driving this. We had a caller yesterday say, why aren't the Republicans stopping this? The Republicans want this. The Republicans, Boehner and others, are pushing for immigration. They're looking for any reason that they can get illegal immigrants legalized. And we see that in the news today as well. But before we leave this story, this is Senator John McCain telling Reuters that establishing refugee application programs in Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala, where domestic abuse, gang violence, and poverty are rampant, is the key to diffusing the growing U.S. border crisis. Really? Why don't we address the root cause of all those things, which is the American war on drugs, or I should say the American war of drugs, because that's what we have inflicted them with. That is driving the violence. That's driving the gangs, just like it drives it here in America. When you prohibit anything, just like we prohibited alcohol, it didn't stop alcohol abuse. All it did was concentrate the alcohol, and it created a massive black market monopoly for organized crime. And this has gotten far beyond that, because this has gone on now for decades. They shut that experiment with alcohol prohibition down after a few years. Now we have gone on for several decades, and it has metastasized into a real war throughout Central and South America. And it's the American government that is pushing this, just as we did in Afghanistan, where the production of heroin went from 10% under the Taliban to 90% under U.S. occupation. Look at what we did with Iran-Contra, with cocaine, bringing that in. We've had Tosh Plumlee talk about all the cocaine that they were bringing in and telling people that they were destroying it. They found out they weren't destroying it. Actually, what they were doing was they were using it to create the crack cocaine epidemic in L.A., and that was part of Iran-Contra. But Pelosi was at the border this weekend, and she said that this border breach, the collapse of the border, I would say, is a, quote, opportunity to serve God's children. Listen to what she had to say. The crisis that some call a crisis, we have to view as an opportunity. If you believe, as we do, that every child, every person has a spark of divinity in them and is therefore worthy of respect, What we saw in those holding rooms was a dazzling, sparkling array of God's children who are worthy of respect. She repeats that phrase, they're worthy of respect. They have a spark of divinity. If she really believes that children are created in the image of God, then why does she push these abortion mandates? Why does she push abortion funding? Why does she allow children to be killed? Why is she so selective as to which children she gives respect and dignity to? Certainly none is shown to any of the children who are flying in at airports or who are stopped on the streets or other transportation hubs by the TSA. Now, she's not the only one who's talking about how this is not a crisis but an opportunity. Of course, General Petraeus has said that he believes that this is now, we're after America. We now have North America. That's what logically follows America, he said. This is NAFTA being brought into effect. As Petraeus said, they passed the laws 20 years ago, and now they're making it a fact. This is their opportunity. And this kind of global consolidation is not something that just the Democrats are pushing, of course. We have the GOP leadership pushing it just as hard. Look at this new House Majority Leader saying that first we have to secure the borders, then we're going to legalize the illegal immigrants. This is Kevin McCarthy, the guy that just replaced Eric Cantor. He said, this is an opportunity. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? An opportunity to negotiate for the legalization of illegal immigrants, but only after the border is secured. That's right. And of course, in Fairfax County, 40% of the kindergartners don't speak English. Now you can watch the InfoWars Nightly News streaming live as it happens for free.
Check it out at Infowars.com/show.
We were talking just before the break about how Nancy Pelosi came to the border of Texas and was talking about the dignity of the children, the respect that they're due, how they had the light of God in them. And of course, we recognize that everyone has basic human rights that need to be defended. But we also recognize, just as she said she'd like to take all of them home with her and wasn't able to, it's just like when you're in an airplane and they tell you that if there's an emergency, the oxygen mask is going to descend. You need to put that oxygen mask on yourself before you put it on a child that is traveling with you. If we allow them to collapse the American economy by collapsing the border and bringing in children from all over the world or immigrants from all over the world, we cannot provide for them any more than she could provide for all these children in her home. She says she wishes she could take all of them home with her. Obviously, there are practical limits as to what we can do. And one of the things that we need to do is remove the conditions that are driving people into this country. And that is the war on drugs. That has ravished Central and South America. It's going to get worse here in America. It's the basis of the police state that's been going on for a long time. Now they're pushing that up into a war of terror. And both of these are being fed by open borders. That's an excuse for them to come after us. Now, of course, they don't give us freedom and dignity within this country. They don't give it to children, and they don't give it to adults. Look at this article here. Professor body slammed by a cop for refusing to show her ID in Arizona, one of the points of entry. Let's take a look at this video.
The ASU officer says Orr repeatedly refused orders, and as he attempts to handcuff her, the struggle intensifies.
Stop fighting me and put your hand behind
Get up! Stop touching me!
Put your hand
Stop!
Put your hand behind your back!
Slams her to the ground right there. Slams her right in the concrete. Jumps on her.
Orr, wearing
She's in a
a
skirt.
dress, is left
The officer was reaching toward her anatomy, and after what had already happened, she felt uncomfortable with his hands.
A lot of people say, well, she was jaywalking, so now she has to show her ID. Well, guess what? There are people coming across the Arizona border in droves. They're committing a crime. They're coming across illegally. Why aren't they being requested to see their ID? Do you understand the double standard that exists? Do you understand that this is over-the-top behavior, slamming women into the ground as after they're already handcuffed? We're going to get two different levels of treatment from the government. A lot of people say, well, I think we're going into 1984. Others say, no, it's more like Brave New World. Well, actually, they're doing both. If you want to stand up, if you're aware, if you're cognizant of what's going on, if you want to talk about your freedom and your dignity, you're going to get the 1984 treatment, just like that Arizona professor did. You're going to get the 1984 boot in your face. But, you know, if you'll take the Brave New World treatment, they'll just keep you pacified with hedonism and distractions. So they're perfectly willing for you to do that, but they're going to come down on you with an iron fist, with a jack boot, if you insist on your personal freedoms. Now, one of the ways to do this, I think, as we look at this, they're going to do that to people who challenge their authority. I think the way that you need to challenge this authority is the way this professor, Julian Heiklin, that I did a report on, the FIJA activist, a professor at Penn State University, he protested jury nullification. Actually, he tried to inform, he wasn't protesting jury nullification, he was protesting the fact that judges were lying to people about jury nullification. He was trying to educate people about that, and he was constantly getting arrested, harassed by the police. And what he would do is, when they would approach him, he would say, am I under arrest or whatever? He would try to determine where they were. If it looked like it was going to get rough, he immediately got on the ground, face down, and put his hands behind his back, just so that they wouldn't have the opportunity to throw him to the ground. So a word to the wise. Now, we've got a report coming up in the next break that we're going to go to. It's Alex Jones talking about Charlie Sheen's confrontation with President Obama. But before we do, I want to talk about another Arizona cop. And, of course, this is a headline that's up on InfoWars. Sheriff Joe to Obama, deploy the U.S. military to Mexico. I don't think that's a good idea. Frankly, I'm not a big Sheriff Joe fan. I don't think he's any friend to civil liberties. He is one of the biggest cheerleaders for the war on drugs, which is destroying our economy, destroying our freedoms, creating this police state. And if we send people to the border, if we send the military to the border, that's what they called for in Rex 84, an Operation Garden Plot. That brings us one step closer to martial law. You know.
You are watching the best of the Alex Jones Show, weekdays from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. Central. Watch live at Infowars.com/show or become a member of InfoWarsNews.com and help us take resistance to the next level.